Good morning, everyone. Hope you had your cup of coffee. Let's get straight into it, as we've got about 30 minutes before us. So, this is the topic, what's the current state of the CMS? But before we get into that, this is, after Martin, it looks like, I'm young, but I started when the Microsoft front page was the thing, and who doesn't remember that it was something where you clicked your whole website, publish with one button, and it was that. And my friends made fun of me that I knew all the CSS bugs in IE 5.5 from top of my head. So that was probably true. So I'm quite some years on the development stage. But what we're going to talk about today is the CMSs. And the Webalizer, which is a platform that tracks technology, actually tracks 261 of them, and there's more. So if we would just want to look at each other, if I would want to have a look at each of those for half a day, I would spend half a year making this talk. So we're not going to do exactly that. I divided the field into 6 categories that I want to talk to you about today, and let's look into those categories. The first one is the emerging no-code movement with stuff like Webflow, Solid Pixels, Squarespace. The other one that we're going to look into is classic stuff like WordPress, Drupal, Joomla. You're probably all familiar with that. In the bottom right corner, there's Netlify, CMS, and Tina, which are Git-based stuff. There's also some flat file CMSs. There's this major movement of headless, where there's like probably 1 or 2 new CMS emerging every day. And there are some platforms like Sanity and the thing that I'm actually doing, which is a platform called Contember. But I'm not going to go much into it today, but you can ask me later. So let's compare them, right? Well, if you Google, you can find like thousands and thousands of comparisons. And most are, let's say, flawed. First part is everyone who's doing a CMS will write a comparison that actually says my CMS is the best. That's the reason he's doing that. The other one, when you're choosing a CMS, you have some sort of a problem in your head, some unique point of view, and from that you're choosing something to use for your project. And as I mentioned, I'm quite some time on this planet already. These are two of my kids. And what we're actually talking about at the conferences is mostly this stage of projects. How to go from the start to launching the project. How much time will it take? How difficult? How many developers, etc. The problem is there's much longer timeline, probably a lot longer actually, until the project dies. And what I want to talk to you about today is this line. What happens after the project is launched with it? Because honestly, whatever you choose, you probably spend pretty similar time doing the project. Depends on functionality, but it won't. The choice of the CMS won't impact the project as much as the team, etc., etc. But what your choice of technology can actually impact is how someone's going to live with the project after that, even when you won't be there, or maybe nobody from the team that did it will be there. So that's my point, or that's the focus of today's talk. And to do that, let me introduce you to the Versum index that I made up. We're going to rate the CMSs, and we're going to rate these 6 categories. Vendor dependent, expensive, run, switch, up to date, and missing feature. So let me introduce you quickly to what I wanna, or what was the focus of each category and how I rated those. So the first one is vendor dependent. I didn't want to rate here if you can, live on when, for example, Webflow turns off. What I wanted to do here is, can someone else take the projects over when the original creator is not there and maybe left in a, in an ugly way or whatever, maybe ran under a bus as a this is something sysops guys says all the time. Can we run the servers when someone is just away at the moment? So that's number one category. Clicker. The second one, it's how expensive it is. And this is pretty simple, how much I'm gonna pay for hosting and if there are some license fees. The third one is how hard is it to run the project, Do I have to understand servers? How difficult is this? And it of course impacts price, but in terms of, let's say, people time. The fourth one is that probably every project will at one point die, either from technical debt or it just needs a new one feature that the current technical stack can't handle. So we will have to switch to something else. And in this point, I want to look into how we can switch the project to a different CMS. I'm not going to touch the front-end part or the let's say, head, if we're talking about headless. Just that I want to host the data somewhere else. So, or manage them. The fifth one, this is the fun part. I came recently across a study from United States, and there was a number. The number was $1.5 trillion. And it was the cost of not keeping your software up to date. Yeah, it's $1.5 trillion per year in the United States. By the way, the whole custom development market is something like 400 billion a year. So it's insane. So we're going to look into how hard is it to keep your chosen CMS up to date and if it matters. And the sixth thing is the missing feature. I did the project, but everything's changing all the time, and probably even before launch there are new features or something that needs to be added. And is the platform that I've chosen flexible enough to accommodate that? We shall see. So this is our index, and this is our 6 groups that we're going to look into and try to rate them. So let's take a deep breath and dive into it. The first one is the no-code. And you probably know Webflow. And for the last 3 or so years, I've started to see a lot of design agencies that just went into making whole websites because they can. They design the thing in Webflow, click publish, and it just works. So it, let's say, opened the market to a lot of new people, and that's great. I actually love Webflow. You can do a lot of stuff there very easily, and people can, or the owners can then do it themselves. So let's look at our index. This is the index. Let me just tell for each of those slides, I've got 6 of them for each group. Let me just comment them briefly, as we don't have like a lot of time to go deep into each of those. But please come to the speakers corner after the talk, and we can discuss it much more. So, can someone else take over? Yeah, sure. Just invite them in. Is it expensive? I actually rated it C because, as you will see later on, a lot of stuff are cheaper than this. Do I need to know something about running stuff? No. So that's A, which is like the highest mark. If I want to switch, well, it's not super good because I can export the stuff from CMS that's in Webflow, either through API or through CSV export. And I can export the templates, but that's it. And I'm probably going to end up doing the whole thing from the start. The up-to-date part, Webflow takes care of that, so that's done. And the missing feature, well, if Webflow doesn't have it, you're pretty screwed. The only thing that you actually can do is inject some JavaScript in header or in the body, and you can, of course, do some magic there. And as even Webflow says, no code is better when you know how to code. But no backend stuff. So, another one, Git-based CMSs. This category is relatively not used much, but actually I think there's a lot of value there. And I'm going to just use this Netlify CMS as my example, which is probably one of the most famous ones. And how it works, they just make commit to your Git repository. You know, you have some interface, mostly written in JavaScript, like you see on the screenshot. And when you click publish, it makes a commit, and on some post-commit hook, there's your site rebuilt, and it's done. So how we're going to rate it? Is it vendor dependent? A little bit, but these stuff are fairly common, fairly easy to understand by someone else who knows at least how JSON looks. So almost any other developer won't be afraid to take over. But one important point, please, when you're doing some project, even for a friend, ask them to make an account or Netlify, Vercel, whatever, and deploy on their account. So if you want to go to Bahamas or somewhere else, they won't be screwed. They can give access to someone else and work with their project when they need to. Is it expensive? Well, in this category, it's actually great because many companies are now offering hosting static sites for free. So if you combine it right, you can host it for zero, even with a pretty large traffic, for example, with Cloudflare pages or something like that. So this is actually something that I am doing for my friends when they need a simple site and I don't want to know about it for the next 10 years. Is it hard to run? Well, no, but you have to just push it to some of those vendors like Netlify, Vercel, Cloudflare Pages, etc. So you have to know how to make a Git push. So that's B. Is it hard to switch to something else? Well, you've got all the files in Git, fairly easy to work with. Up to date, well. You mostly do npm update with this stuff as they're written in JavaScript, but there's no auto update. However, this might take a better mark because the updates are not a security issue. It's just static JavaScript files, so it doesn't matter much. But if there's some feature missing, as it's all statically hosted, and you need some form or something, you end up writing some edge functions. So it's pretty hard to do something like that. So that's D. One let's say branch in this, and I just want to point your eye on this tiny project. It's called Tina, and it's from guys who made Forestry, and they're doing this next-gen content management, which is a Git-based CMS. However, what is interesting actually about it is that they are hosting a small cloud for you. And they're doing GraphQL API automatically on top of your files. So you can work with GraphQL API. It makes commit into Git. It opens a lot of interesting possibilities for some small projects. So do check it out. They are, by the way, they are pretty early. The cloud is still in beta, so we don't know on pricing or so. Another one are flat file CMSs, and as you probably can imagine from the name, it's pretty standard CMS. However, there's no database anywhere, so all files. One of the, I think, most used example is this graph. I hope I'm saying it right. It's for a long time on the market. It's written in PHP and pretty similar to what you know from WordPress in terms of it has administration, it has some templates, actually in Twig in this case, and you can do a lot of stuff with that. But you just don't have the relational database or any database behind that. So our index, is it vendor dependent? Well, we're slowly getting into a category where you're actually writing code, and you're actually writing a lot of code in many cases. So yeah, I'm rating this C because when you don't have a database, you don't have one layer of complexity that someone else needs to understand. So that's definitely something that is worth thinking about. The other one, expensive, well, you can pretty much host it anywhere you want. It's PHP, $2 a month or something. Is it difficult to run? Yeah. You have to know something about servers. At least you know, okay, what server do I need to order, what version of PHP it has to run, etc., etc. So if you leave the project and someone else would try to run it, he or she has to know the same stuff. How hard is it to switch to something else? Well, this is problematic mostly because as there are plugins, features, and a lot of code, you have a hard time figuring out what actually what functions are there and what you need to copy or move somewhere else. So I'm rating it pretty low. Up to date is the same. You as the developer need to take care of that, and I didn't actually found any like managed hosting for flat file CMSs. But if there's some missing feature, you mostly have a full power of in terms of graph PHP, so you can do a lot of stuff yourself. Okay, so the next one, classic CMSs. We might stop there, This is the market share of WordPress. It's currently at the 75% of the whole CMS market. Yeah, and it's by the way still growing. So it should probably have all A's, right? Well, I don't think so. This is. I actually divided the rating for classic CMS is two parts. One is when you self-host it, and the other if you use some managed hosting. In terms of WordPress, there's a lot of options. So, but let's have a look at the first one, and it's the self-hosted part. So, is it vendor dependent? Well, hell yeah. Let me tell you here a story that my friend Robert from Nehopat shared with me. They had a project in WordPress that they need to migrate to something else, and then they were like, okay, let's do an export of the database. We will take the data, transfer it to somewhere else. So they looked into the database, and there was some, gibberish. And they were like, okay, did someone did base 64 over the data or something? So let's try decode base 64. What will it turn out to? Well, do nothing. So, okay, so what the hell? Well, the story ends that they figured out that it's actually 2 times base 64 save data. Some plugin did that. It had a lot of we will make your WordPress run faster in description. So because of these reasons, because plugins can do like anything in WordPress, I'm rating it this low. Otherwise, it would rate pretty well because everyone knows it. One tricky part, though, is that WordPress is still very problematic using with Git. So you have to do some, let's say, dirty tricks to make it Gitable and have some, let's say, classic development workflow. Otherwise, it's not expensive. It's okay to run because you just need a MySQL and PHP, and everyone has it. When you're switching, it's the same as the flat file CMSs. You pretty much don't know what's going on. Keeping it up to date, well, we can discuss this one, but mostly from what I'm seeing on the market is very outdated WordPresses, and the reason is that when you have some plugins there, you have to take care of updating plugins to the version of WordPress that it supports, and it's sometimes very complicated to do so. And when there's a missing feature, well, you can almost program anything. One funny part with WordPress is if you use some custom fields, it saves them very strangely into database. Each custom field is its own row, so it can get very, let's say, load heavy on the database part. So that's why it's B, because otherwise you will find a plugin for like anything. And of course, as I mentioned, there are managed hosting, and it's much better because what they actually do is that they choose plugins that you can install on them. They don't support anything. So you are limited in the scope to something that they actually take care of. For example, WP Engine, which is one of the most popular hosting for WordPress, is doing the updates by itself. And by the way, I found out they can even do commits to Git if you want to use Git with WordPress. So that I was very surprised that they can do that. So good for them. This is of course more expensive. Someone else is taking care of managing stuff, so they want some money for that. Though 25 per month is not that much. And as I'm running it on some managed service, if you will from the beginning run it for on an account owned by your client, it's pretty easily to turn it over to someone else. Switching is the same, and missing feature is the same. So that's classic CMSs. The fifth category is headless, and that's probably one of the most talked about category in CMSs today. I'm gonna talk about two examples. Many of those CMSs are software as a service, so you have a hosted service that you're using. I chose the Graph CMS as example. The other one, of course, are open source services like Strapi, and we will get into that in a bit. So, I forgot that I actually added here story block as well, because you can rate it's from point of running stuff, it's pretty much the same. But of course, from point of features, there's a lot of differences. Anyway, our rating. So. What's good about these managed services is that it's a service. You mostly write some configuration, push it there, and they run it for you, and that's it. So it doesn't depend much on you. These services are pretty expensive. You can find some who start something at about $90, but a lot of them start at prices like $400 a month. But you don't have to know anything about running. They do some scaling, etc., etc. If you want to switch to some other CMS, well, that's what the headless CMSs are actually made for, as they provide an API, so you can pretty much switch to anything else. Just maybe maybe make some different API calls from your front end, and everything runs very smoothly. As it's software as a service, they keep it up to date by themselves. But if there's some missing feature, you are limited in your options what you can do by the platform. Though, as they provide the API, you can always write some worker or something else. So it's quite fine. From the open source community, you probably all know Strapi. Strapi is one of the, I think, oldest headless CMSs. It's open source, and for now it doesn't have any managed hosting. They're saying that it should be available this year, but they're saying it for a year. So, but their partners are saying that it should happen later this year. Anyway, if you want to self-host it, it's something that's not for everyone, because there's some Node.js, some database, etc. You just can't copy it over FTP to some PHP hosting. It won't run. So it's so it's harder to host than classic WordPress or something. Most of these CMSs are more expensive because, for one part, they often charge some money for license. For example, Strapi starts charging you when you want to change roles. They give you some 3 default roles with some permissions, but if you want to change at least one permission, you have to start paying them some fee, and you still host it yourself. And of course, Node hostings are more expensive than PHP hosting. How difficult it is to run? Well, from my experience, it's pretty difficult. How hard it is to switch? Well, we discussed that in the previous part. How hard it is to keep up to date? Well, you're doing the updates. So it depends up to the developer. But if there's a missing feature, it's pretty fine. It's the same as WordPress or something. So, and the last category that I've taken is I'm calling it platform. And the difference between headless CMSs and the platform is that headless CMSs provide you with API and administration in one pack. So if you want a site, you just say, okay, I want this structure, and they give you some administration for that. Platforms don't do that. They actually divide the structure and the administration. So you can have it completely independent on each other, which is, of course, more work, but also you can do a lot of more stuff. So, for example, Sanity is often used for use cases when you want to work with content on dozens or hundreds of websites at one point. You're sharing some content, etc. The same is with our Contember, which is the only slide that I'm having in this presentation about the thing we're doing, but I'll be happy to tell you more in Speaker's Corner. But let's rate it. I'm actually rating Sanity here because otherwise it would be flawed, So is it vendor dependent? Well, what the platforms are mostly doing is that you're writing configuration and you're pushing it to some on their managed service. So if someone understands how to write the configuration, they're fine with that. Of course, the platforms are the most heavyweight category, so they're pretty expensive. But most of them are, I think, all of them are managed. You can switch pretty easily. It's the same with headless CMS. They all actually keep their platform, of course, up to date by default. And if there's missing feature, you have a lot of options what to do. However, of course, as it's a bit hosted, so there are some small limitations. So let me head into the end of the talk and present you this, I don't know how to call it, graph. So these are the 6 categories, and this is a graph of our rating. As Tomáš from Supercoders told me before the talk, it's a mess. Yeah. And I think that you actually saw it even in the rating. You know, there's no silver bullet. There's nothing that I can just like go to. What I wanted to show you is that there are, let's say, 6 options from which to choose from. And what I think you should actually aim at when choosing a CMS is to go for the, let's say, lowest functionality possible for your project. So it will be as easy to run and maintain as possible. But otherwise, you can just compare the ratings and say, okay, this wins. It doesn't. There was actually a table at one point in the presentation. So to sum it up, what I want you to do before you choose your next CMS is to imagine yourself here, or playing with your kids or whatever, but having a calm time. And suddenly your phone is ringing and someone is telling you, hey, what's up, my site is down, everything's broken, something is not updating, and I need you to fix it ASAP. And I want you to do the choices that you're doing in your project in a way that you will make this possibility as tiny as possible. That's it from me. Thank you. Have a great Web Expo today, and hope to talk to you in the Speaker's Corner in a few minutes.